Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf here, and I would say I'm solo, but that would be a lie. I am here without Gavin today because, again, he is off calling the Hoop Hall High School tournament right now. But, of course, the big news of the day, the New York Knicks have traded for Cam Reddish for the price of Kevin Knox and Charlotte's protected first-round pick. So I'm going to be getting into that, but I'm not going to be doing it alone. I enlisted some help. I'd be lying if I said that I've watched a ton of Cam Reddish and I didn't want to give an opinion based off just some stats and stuff. So I wanted to get some opinions from people that are watching him consistently that know the Hawks very well. So I brought in Andrew Kelly and Zach Hood from Peachtree Hoops, and Swish, who's on Hawks Twitter and does a lot of Hawks spaces, came on to talk Hawks with me, to talk about Cam Reddish, what he's good at, what he's not good at, whether the numbers that seem to be so damning of him are really that damning or not. And we're going to get into a ton of great stuff. I'm really excited to bring this episode to you guys. So we will take a quick jump here and then be right in to get into this episode.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. I today wanted to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. We really appreciate you supporting us and supporting the show. We're, of course, available on all your favorite podcast platforms and now YouTube. So if you want to see my cool RJ Barrett hoodie today from the Strickland, then you could check that out. I'm, of course, Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today, like I said, I've got three great guests. I'll just introduce the news here real quick. So Woj breaks the news earlier today. The Knicks receive Cam Reddish, Solomon Hill, who is likely not long for the team, probably just going to be cut, maybe waived and stretched, I don't know. And Brooklyn's 2025 second rounder in exchange for Kevin Knox and Charlotte's protected 2022 first round pick that the Knicks got in this past draft. Throughout all their finaglings on that night. It was the trade that ultimately let Charlotte select Kai Jones with that pick. But that pick is protected 1-18 this year, 1-16 next year, and then 1-14 the next 2 years after that. If it doesn't convey, meaning that basically the Hornets haven't made the playoffs or got stranded in the play-in for all those years, then it conveys as 2 second-round picks in 2026 or 2026 and 2027, I think. So likely to probably convey as a first sometime in the next 3 years or so, mid to late first, if they continue on the trajectory that they're on. But at any rate, the Knicks get a really intriguing guy in Cam Reddish. As I said in the intro, I'd be lying if I said that I've watched a ton of him. I've looked at the stats. A lot of them really are not painting too pretty of a picture as far as his net rating, what he's looking like on, defensively for this team, the Hawks team right now. But I wanted to bring on some guests that could really shed some actual light on him in terms of having actually watched him and, really have a good opinion about him. And I wanted to get multiple perspectives. So I brought in three really good guests. The first of which is Andrew Kelly, who is from Peachtree Hoops. And so I'm going to just go ahead and throw us right into my conversation with Andrew Kelly as our first guest. All right, and I'm joined now by Andrew Kelly, a contributor for Peachtree Hoops of SB Nation, who you might know on Twitter as @AndlandKel. Andrew, how you doing? And you ready to talk some Cam Reddish?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad I have something to talk about personnel-wise other than the Hawks just losing all the time.
Yeah, right. Well, I can give you the Kevin Knox scouting report after this if you really want it. I don't know how much you're going to get out of it. But yeah, so I wanted to dive right in, not take any time here. I think one thing that I've noticed that the people that are sort of detracting this trade online for the Knicks today so far have been saying is the numbers are not kind to Cam Reddish, particularly the catch-alls, the advanced numbers, that sort of thing, other than maybe his three-point percentage, which I will say objectively looks really good this year, especially on catch and shoot. So what do you think of the catch-all stats have kind of been missing about Cam? And do you think that, as someone who's watching the Hawks a lot, do you think he's actually serving as an active detriment on the court right now, or is there something else going on here that the numbers aren't really capturing?
I think it's fair to say that he is overall like a net negative. That's not particularly unusual, though, for a player his age, especially guys on the wings. He's getting used to having the ball in his hands more. There's aspects of his role that can explain part of that, but I think it's fair to say that he probably has been a negative overall. It doesn't mean that he hasn't done some things well, but I think when you look at it holistically, he probably has. But you mentioned like his three-point shooting. That's really been probably the biggest area of improvement for him this year. He's shooting 48% from the corners. He's a good contested shot maker, even on catch and shoot looks. For example, like he's 67th percentile overall on catch and shoot, but 74th percentile guarded. And he has more shots that are guarded than unguarded. For Knicks fans that want to see kind of like what he is at his best, if you go back and look at the Bulls game from last month, he had, I think maybe like 8 threes off the top of my head, but he had some really impressive shot making. So that's sort of what he looks like at his best. But to answer your question, yeah, I think he probably is a negative overall, but I think that there is a player in there. And I think that there's definitely some like points of improvement that might be helped with better circumstances.
So there's some stuff that was more in his scouting report going into Duke, like coming out of high school, that I think sort of got squashed a little bit when he was at Duke. But then, I think that from what I understand, the Hawks experimented with this a little bit, which is sort of like creation and playmaking from him. And it sounds like, based off what I'm hearing today, that sometimes his creation, I mean, he's okay at finding his shots, but he's not necessarily taking good shots, particularly like in the mid-range and stuff like that. Like there is some evidence to suggest that he's really not shooting well on pull-ups, 29.6% overall. He's also shooting about that same number from three as well. So that's not a number you love to see from, pulling up off the dribble type stuff. But that is a skill that the Knicks front office really loves. So, like, I think that that's probably something that they see in him that they're looking to embrace. Sort of similar to, the free agent signings they made this year, Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier. Those are big, points of emphasis with them, is that they can, create, they can shoot off the dribble really well, that sort of thing, and find those look. Alec Burks can do that, and that's a guy that gets a ton of minutes. RJ Barrett is growing into that as well. Julius Randle, obviously, that was his bread and butter last year, was, creating and that sort of thing. But the other important thing with those guys is that they're really good at, identifying when to pass out of those situations too. And that's something that, I think Cam had a rep for before college as well, as being sort of a creator. But in the pros, like this year, for example, has an assist percentage of 7.1%. I mean, that doesn't really suggest that he's looking for others too often. Because even among somewhat low assist guys, at the wing and guard spots, that's still pretty low, all things considered. So what do you think about that? As far as his creation and playmaking, is there something there? Is there like a framework that you think that could be worked with? Or do you think that he's, not so much that player and it's going to be more of like ideally a 3-and-D type guy?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good synopsis of what he does and what he doesn't do well. He shot 30% from mid-range this year, and he's taken like the most mid-range shots from his career. So 30% of his shots are actually mid-range shots. He is like a good catch and shoot guy, as you mentioned at the start of the pod. So you would ideally like to see, more of that from him than his self-creation, where he's really limited by his handle. He's never really had a great handle, and that's something that's going to have to be refined for him to unlock that. 54% of his shots are self-created if you use like the PvP stats proxy for that. And that means that basically, you're holding the ball for 2 or more seconds. And the league average on those is 47%. So he's above league average as far as like how many he takes, but he shoots 43% effective field goal percentage on those, and league average is 47%. So you have a pretty big split as far as like he's taking a lot, but he's not making a lot. And this all comes back to just really taking too many mid-range shots. If you catch him every now and then, like he does have like some pretty spin moves that can make him look like really impressive from mid-range. But when you look at the numbers, it's just, it hasn't been there. So I think that sometimes he can be underrated as far as like going to the rim. Like he's developing a decent floater, like from short mid-range, that you'll see he has more of a guards kind of game. He doesn't have a lot of like vertical pop, so he has to rely on that more when he starts to get into the painted area. But he does offer some rim pressure, and he's pretty good at getting fouled. So I think sort of like what you would look for him to do is operate primarily as like a catch and shoot kind of guy, and then also be a weapon off closeouts, not settling for mid-range shots, not trying to get your shots up when they're there, but just trying to get to the rim, when you can't get that shot off. I think is what you'd like to see him do. He will like flash like an impressive pass every now and then. He had like a really nice kind of over the shoulder pass and pick and roll not too long ago. So you'll see that and you think, okay, I think that there could be something there. But then, I mean, he's got more turnovers and assists for his career. So the numbers just don't really support that, like what may be there aesthetically sometimes, that I think people see in him. But I think that there is something there. And I think that if you actually look at his numbers, like scoring at a pick and roll, they're not that bad, but he just settles a lot. And he has a lot of kind of predetermined reads where it's like, I'm going to shoot now, and that's definitely something that impedes him.
Do you think maybe to circle back a little bit to the mid-range shooting, obviously I think his jumper looks pretty pure, like based off of, watching some tape of him, and then, his percentages like from three, shooting 38% bears that out, 90% from the free throw line. I mean, that's obviously like elite level. As Knicks fans, we're pretty familiar with like Emmanuel Quickley is sort of like that as well. But do you think that maybe the case with his mid-range stuff is more that he's just sort of taking stuff from the practice court that maybe shouldn't be leaving the practice court just yet and trying things that he's not fully comfortable with on the court? Or do you think he really just, is there like a fundamental difference between how he shoots on the pull-up versus how he shoots, just from stationary, like a free throw or a spot up three?
Yeah, I think when you look at a lot of his misses, a lot of times, like his leg, like his lower body just does not look right. Like his knees will be too far out or too far in. But when he actually has his feet set, he's like quite effective. So I think that when he has less like predetermined reads where he's just, let me get to my mid-range spin, pull up J. When he starts to think it out like a little bit more and he has better process and he has more of a rhythm on it and actually has a consistent mechanics on his lower body, I think he can. But it's hard to see that being a strength of his game when you look at it, now for 3 years it hasn't been, and he's taking the most mid-range shots of his career. So I think that's just something in general you would like to see less of from him. I just think that's ultimately what it boils down to. But he does still have like his flashes there. So it's, it's fine, short shot clock offense with like 4 seconds left on the clock or something like that. But it's not something you want to be his bread and butter by any means.
Yeah. So I think this sort of leads to, you've sort of given some, bits and pieces to this, but to put it all together, what would the ideal version of Cam Reddish look like to you? And then based off what you know about the Knicks, which, if it's the same as what I know about the Hawks, I mean, obviously they had the playoff series last year, but, they've had some regular season meetings, that sort of thing. Do you think that he could find that ideal version of himself in New York?
I think for me, like sort of like my high end, like upside comp for Reddish, like going back to when he was a prospect, and I've always been like, I would say fairly optimistic about him, is like, Houston Rockets Trevor Ariza, essentially somebody that is adequate at checking, the other team's best player and also adequate from three on like pretty good volume. Like that's the type of player that can start for a contender, that plays for a long time and is a complementary piece in team building structures. So I think that's like what you would like to see from Reddish. Just having, I guess, less license to kind of freestyle and do stuff that can be detrimental is like what you want to kind of dial back on. But with the Knicks specifically, I think it's pretty interesting. I know at times they've been kind of short on second creators, and that was like, the thesis of why they got Fournier. So if they could develop his passing a little bit more, if they're more patient with him, it's possible he could unlock that part of his game a little bit more. But I think ultimately what it boils down to is like he has upside as like a catch and shoot guy. Like he's 6 foot, probably 6'8", somewhere in that range. And he's got a long wingspan. So he has like a lot of margin for error, even on hard closeouts, to get a shot off. So I think that's something that could be really useful for the Knicks, especially if they start to explore like more with like RJ Barrett's creation or addition to Randall's. Like he's somebody that could really take advantage of like kickouts to the corner and things like that. So I think it's possible for Reddish. I mean, I think he has to kind of learn what his best role is in the NBA, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. And like, that's how I think he could be successful if he's willing to sort of settle into a complementary, supplementary kind of piece, as opposed to being like, someone that had the second most self-created attempts on the Hawks. Like, I think that could work. So I think there's definitely a player there, and I think it was a good move for the Knicks to try and like buy low on him. But just, he still has a lot that he needs to actualize to be a good player.
So that the move for the Knicks to buy low, obviously you think this was a buy low. So I'm just curious, what were your thoughts on the trade when it broke? Like, how are you feeling about it now? We're, 6-7 hours removed from it. I know there's usually a little bit of clarity that comes outside of the initial moment of a big trade, as we learned with like the Porzingis trade and stuff like that. But how did you feel about the move, and how are you feeling about it now?
Well, I was expecting him to get traded. I mean, he's wanted out for a while, so that wasn't really a surprise for him to get moved. I mean, that he got moved ahead of the deadline, I guess, was a little bit surprising, and the Knicks weren't the team that I necessarily expected, even though there was that report tying them to him a couple of days ago. But it's really something that I like for both sides. Like from the Hawks side, they have a player that they weren't going to keep, they wanted to move on. And they got a protected first that, if you're bullish on Charlotte, I think that probably does eventually convey as a mid first. I think it becomes seconds in like 2026 if it doesn't convey before then. But I think that they're going to be a playoff team before then. So I think it's good from the Hawks side. And from the Knicks side, I mean, giving up a protected first for like Reddish, who still has a year plus on his rookie deal, like that makes sense. I mean, he was, obviously he was teammates with Barrett at Duke. So you hope that he can, relate to him on a personal level and kind of encourage him to like bring out his best qualities. So I think it was like something that made sense for, both sides. It's the Hawks got what they were looking for, and I think the Knicks got what they were looking for.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for popping on, Andrew. I really appreciate all the insight and everything and the great stats and analysis. Do you want to just remind everybody where to find you online, where to find your work and all that good stuff?
Yep. I use A Kelly on Twitter, ANDLANKELL. Just mainly tweet about the Hawks, but some NBA stuff in general. But yeah, appreciate you having me on, man.
Cool. Thanks so much for popping on. And, maybe we'll bring you on another time. I don't think the Knicks and Hawks are going to beat the playoffs again this year,
yeah,
for being realistic.
Man. Maybe the play-in. We'll see.
We'll figure something out. But thanks so much for popping on, man.
Yep. I'll see you.
All right, that was a great convo with Andrew Kelly. So going to take our first break now, though, and remind you that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You've been hearing me tell you about Prize Picks for months. Have you signed up yet? If you haven't, now is the perfect time. For a limited time, Prize Picks has an exclusive no-brainer offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point, but you just have to use code NBA. That's right. With this exclusive offer for Locked On fans only, you can use code NBA to get a $50 free credit if any of your picks scores even a single point on Prize Picks. What is Prize Picks, though? Prize Picks is the best NBA daily fantasy sports prop game on the market. It offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players only recording a handful of minutes every game. It offers every prop you can think of for points, assists, rebounds, threes made, you name it, they got it. And you can pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections and win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's really just you versus the projected numbers. PrizePicks also allows mixed sport entries. You can take the over on Embiid, come out with the under on Rodgers in the same entry. Maybe against the Hawks in the Knicks next game, you want to take the over on Cam Reddish points. You could do that combined with, betting on anything else going on in sports that day. And you can use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. So go to prizepicks.com today or go to your App Store and download the app. All users that deposit and use our promo code NBA will get a $50 free credit if your PrizePicks entry scores a single point. That's right. All users that deposit and use our promo code NBA will get $50 free if your PrizePicks entry scores a single point. It's going to happen. You're going to get free $50. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. All right, so now we're going to come into our second segment. This is where I'm going to talk with Zach Hood from Peachtree Hoops, a bit about Cam Reddish's defense. I thought this was a really good conversation. Hope you guys enjoy it. All right, I'm joined now by Zach Hood, who you might know on Twitter as @zhood_. He's a writer and editor at Peachtree Hoops and Clutch Points. Zach, how you doing, man? How's things been for you today with this Cam Reddish news?
I'm doing well. Not that surprising. I actually saw something I think 2 days ago that said the Knicks were interested. So, I didn't think it would happen this fast. But Cam has been in rumors since the draft or, leading up to the 2021 draft. So, not that surprising. The return, I think Hawks fans at least would have liked to get more in terms of the protections and stuff like that. But, yeah, it's always crazy when someone gets traded in January kind of. But with Cam and with the Hawks 6 games under 500, I don't think it's not the most shocking thing that could have happened.
Yeah, so I wanted to we'll get more into the Hawks fan perspective on it and everything in a minute. I did want to kind of get into his defense though. So the numbers have been shared a million times today by Knicks fans, certainly people that are not sold on the deal or whatever. Obviously, from Basketball Reference, With their on-off, they have the Hawks as being 14.3 points worse per 100 with him on the court. You get similar numbers on NBA stats. They have him as a -10 net rating, which I would say is probably the worst of all their regular rotation players. So there was actually some pretty positive stats shared out today on him as well. But first I wanted to get into, like, how do you think he's looked on defense? To read fan reactions from Hawks fans, I feel like people mostly view him as more of a defensive minded prospect. People seem to think that he has this potential ceiling as a really good defender. But the numbers really aren't bearing that out. Obviously, if you look at the net ratings and just sort of the impact metrics, like there's if you look at some of the ones like D LeBron, D Raptor, that sort of thing, he's in the very low percentiles. Like D LeBron, for example, first percentile, 13th percentile on D Raptor. It really doesn't paint a pretty picture, even though those stats aren't perfect and the catch-alls never are. But, what's been your thoughts on his defense? And, has he been like a detriment to the Hawks on that end? Or do you think that he's sort of just figuring things out? Is it schematic? Is it, what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's been worse this season, honestly, than it was maybe at any time in his career, other than his first 10 games or something. I don't know the reason for that. I know he's been pretty healthy this season. He hasn't missed a chunk of time or anything, which in the past he has kind of struggled with. I don't want to say he's injury prone, but he's had a couple things that kept him out a while. So if you go look at his games played compared to RJ or someone from that class that's been durable, he's only played, I think, 115 or 20 games in 2.5 years. So it's one of those seasons was cut off at 67 games. So it's not like he missed, 50 games or whatever that season. But I don't know. I kind of think it's a combination of things. I think the second unit, he's playing with Gallinari, Gorgie Jing, Lou Williams, and it's 4 dudes who can't defend and Cam Reddish. And maybe it's 5 dudes who can't defend. I don't know, but to have one guy that really even is profiled as, a good defensive player or even an above average defensive player on your second unit, when teams are staggering, 2 starters and 3 guys that are probably not as old and immobile as Gorgie Jing and Danilo Gallinari, it can be tough to get stops. And I think Cam hasn't been disciplined this season, to be honest. He's gambled a lot. He ends up flying out, going for some turnover, and then people are going downhill at Gallo and Jing. So that's why they got killed so bad when he was out, because then they go back on offense and it's just Lou Williams and Cam Reddish taking turns shooting bad shots. And then there's no transition defense. So there are very, very specific reasons that you wouldn't see if you didn't watch, that the numbers look so bad. And it's not just they put Cam in, they're about to get destroyed here. No, if Cam played with Trey, Collins, and Capella all the time, he might still be just as bad, but those numbers would obviously look way better. He's played a lot of minutes with some not great lineups. And I don't know if that'll I don't know if that'll get better in New York or not. I'm not saying he's going to go to New York and all of a sudden be the great defender, but I don't think he was in a good situation to put up good stats in terms of all those on-off things that you're doing.
Yeah, that's certainly something the Knicks fans can relate to, because the Knicks have some pretty good individual defenders, but with the Knicks, it's kind of been the opposite. The starters, for most of the year, they've finally been kind of turning it on lately, but for most of the year, the starters were no good. So you had some guys that were putting up pretty decent, defensive performances. And, eye test, you'd be like, okay, this guy is still a pretty good defender, be it RJ Barrett, Alec Burks, Mitchell Robinson at times, stuff like that. But the overall numbers were not looking great because, the whole unit that they were with was just so rotten to the core that nobody could really defend. So if that's sort of the case with the Hawks defense on that bench unit, I think that's pretty relatable to Knicks fans. I also, a good account, I guess I'm a little biased, it's associated with my website, The Strickland, but Analytics on Twitter shared some stats that were pretty interesting to me. So some of them were from B-Ball Index, which we always love B-Ball Index, but as far as hustle stats and that sort of thing, Cam apparently was 95th percentile in passing lane defense, 86th percentile in defensive matchup difficulty, 85th percentile in, or I'm sorry, 84th percentile in on-ball perimeter defense, 84th percentile in, well, this doesn't apply to this, but catch and shoot three-pointers. That's great, actually. And 77th percentile in defensive versatility. So all those suggest, I mean, B-Ball Index looks at things a little more granular and just sort of looks at the player rather than the unit that they're with. So that seems to bode pretty well. It makes it seem like he might be a good Tibbs player. And then with some hustle stats, these came from per 36ers. He was among 250 players, 8th in deflections, 29th in contested threes, 36th in loose balls recovered, and 45th in distance traveled. So those all bode pretty well. So do you sort of think, and I sort of think I know the answer based off where you were going in that first answer, but do you think his troubles are a little more based in effort level, or do you think they're more based in scheme? Because to me, those numbers would seem to paint a guy that is pretty active on defense and is doing a pretty good job there.
No, he's active. I don't think he's Draymond as far as like focus level, but he definitely has, mistakes on defense. But I don't think it's usually because he's not trying. I think especially for a third-year player who's from Duke and wants to score, I think the effort level on defense is completely, there. And I think, I don't know. All those stats you bring up, especially, I know we're talking about defense, but he is a great catch and shoot three-point shooter, or at least he has been this season. He's actually shooting almost 90% on free throws. So, like, you can kind of see, like, the shooting talent there. The reason the overall percentages are so bad is because of his shot selection. He takes a lot of tough long twos, a lot of ugly traffic floaters, and like he just plays like with a bag that he doesn't have. That's really the best way. It's like a pickup player when it's like pass the ball, man. Like, and it's not always. There are games where he is good and he makes the extra pass and he's on time with his reads and stuff, but there are games when he just doesn't, and he just kind of stops with the ball. And I don't know. I think where you're talking about the starters versus the bench, I don't know that he fits with the starters on offense, but he does on defense. And then it sounds like he doesn't fit with the bench on defense. So, like, him and Randall and Barrett, you got to have more shooting, in my opinion, especially when all three of those guys like to pound the rock and go do their own thing. So, there are some concerns there, but I think for the Knicks, as far as the overall scheme, like their overall like view of it is the protection on the picks makes it where like, the worst case is you lose like the 19th pick this year or something. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really hate it at all. I actually like it for the Knicks. I think the Hawks just did it because like they're tired of talking about it. They've lost 8 out of 10. They've lost 9 in a row at home. If Cam is like this thing where he's like, oh, I want shots, they're like, all right, dude, just go get them. Because like we can't sit here and lose over and over and talk about you over and over. And, I think they got to a point where they realized that was almost like, if not the ceiling on the deal, that was pretty close to it. So, I think probably makes perfect sense from the Knicks side. Because, it looks like this is – I don't want to make your base here mad, but this looks like maybe not a championship season. So picking up a piece like Reddish and giving him minutes is a good idea. And also, if you did somehow get to that point where you want to beat the Nets, he can guard all three of those dudes. So yeah, he's a good guy to have. It just is done in Atlanta. It just something needed to change, and he was not going to get an extension here, so he got traded.
Yeah, trust me when I say you're not going to anger anybody in Knicks fandom except for maybe the most delusional homer types if you say that this team is not competing for a championship this year. Because I think, much like the Hawks,
all I see is those videos after they lost to the Hawks. So I don't know who's who and the Knicks fans.
Yeah. If all you watch is the side talk videos, you might get a very different opinion of the Knicks fans.
Yeah. People yelling on the street in the middle of a pandemic. So.
Yeah. There is a lot of that going on after certain games or whatever. People get a little rowdy. Right. You get a little taste of success, but
people can't say that they don't care though. That's always good.
Yeah. People definitely do care. That's for sure. Well, I was going to ask what your reaction was when the trade news broke, but that pretty much covered it. So what I'll close with you is what do you see if you're going to look in your crystal ball? What do you think Cam Reddish's floor could be, and what do you think his ceiling could be based off what you've seen so far in the NBA? Because it sounds to me like he has a lot of really intriguing tools, and that's sort of my opinion on him too. But I almost wonder if maybe he might do like having both worked as writers, you learn a lot about like self-editing. Like, you could write 3,000 words, but maybe you should, parse that down to 1,000 or something, and I almost wonder if Cam Reddish is, should start parsing down his skill set a little bit and start doing the things he does best if he wants to really stick in the league, which would be like defending. It sounds like is a good point for him. And then basically sort of from a Knicks fan perspective, playing almost like how Quentin Grimes plays, which is mostly being a spot up shooter with the ability to put the ball on the floor a little bit and do some things with the ball in his hands that way, but not necessarily looking to be Kobe Bryant out there every time. So what's your sort of read on that? Like, what do you think as far as a floor ceiling for him in the NBA for the rest of his career here?
Well, I think he was making strides in that department as far as like playing within the team. And, I don't think he was malicious in his shot attempts. I think he just wanted to be aggressive, and it doesn't always look pretty when you don't have, a million reps in the league. So his floor, though, like his absolute floor, like the complete, like worst thing I could see is Nick Young. Like just some jacker who never gives up on being the 20-point a game guy. Because, Nick Young could kind of like sort of defend if he wanted to, but he never – I don't know. That's just like the floor. He's obviously a better defender, but Nick Young was a great shooter. So that's like the floor. Maybe like a little bit above the floor is just like a 3-and-D guy that you can't really count on. But like, he's too good to just not be on a team. Mm-hmm. He just plays like kind of like TLC. Like he bounces around on good teams on 1-year deals, stuff like that. And then I think kind of a median to ceiling, I guess ceiling is like, 18 points a game and like really good defense. Mm-hmm. What I kind of expect would be like 12 to 15, not that efficient points a game, but he's going to get to the line and make the free throws to pull the true shooting up. He's going to hopefully be like not less aggressive on defense, but like less reckless in terms of like you're not stealing the ball from NBA guards at a high enough rate to really like try to do it over and over. You know what I mean? Like mm-hmm. You're getting out of position way more than you're actually getting, or fouling way more than you actually get the like turnover. So I think there's just things that like I would not look at him as someone who's about to be extension eligible in terms of how old he is. I would look at him like someone who's like halfway through their second season and like needs like, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, but like a crap ton of reps. And like just once he gets those reps, hopefully like all those processing mistakes are cut out on both ends of the court. And like, because like you said, all the things that you could like if you were trying to talk yourself into him, there's a lot there. So if he could just kind of like you said, hone in on catch and shoot. He needs to improve in playmaking, but just like maybe don't try to do it so much in the games until he gets better at it. Mm-hmm. But there is a struggle with that. That's been the Hawks for 2 years. Like, if Cam. That's like, I don't know how long it'll be before you're saying if Cam, and it's been like 6 months. But you know what I mean? Like it hasn't been like a seamless like, Cam improved on this. Like he's kind of up and down, and like one night he's like amazing, and the next night it's like, who the hell is that? And like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to Knicks fans like just like violent reactions in whatever direction this goes. Like if he scores like 24 on Saturday and they beat the Hawks, I cannot wait until people to say like we traded the next McGrady, or not but the Hawks traded the next McGrady, or whatever crazy people are gonna say. Or if he's terrible, then the Knicks fans are gonna say like, cut this guy, like whatever. It's just, it's the way Hawks fans are with Cam too. And it's like not even, people can't help it. They either hate him or they think he's like a star. I don't know if it's Duke, just the fact that he like looks really cool. Like that's what I think will be good about New York, is like he won't have to be a star to be a star. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like he's Duke, he's Cam Reddish. He's already like a cult figure between his own peers, like worship him. As far as like in the high school AAU days, like everyone just thinks Cam is amazing and loves him. So he's gonna be like, if he's good enough to stay in the rotation, he's gonna be like so popular and like get like so much New York stuff off the court that he might not care about the shots anymore. I think in Atlanta, it's like you're either Trey or you're not. So in New York, there's room for like a lot of stars. You know what I mean? Even like Jeremy Lin or whoever. You don't have to be like the MVP to like sell a bunch of jerseys and stuff, you know, in New York. So I think it's a good fit and it's a good place for him to like just be himself because like I said, he kind of likes the attention and the cameras and like they'll just always be there. He doesn't have to like, you know, do anything spectacular to make news in New York. So
well, and hopefully being reunited with some other guys from his general draft class, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, all those guys too. Maybe we'll have that sort of effect on him to help him get himself on the best track for his career too. But at any rate, Zach, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate all the insights into Cam here. And do you want to just remind everybody where to find your work and where to find you on Twitter and all that stuff before we sign off?
Yeah. I was just going to say the last thing. It's only going to take like a 4-game winning streak, and Stephen A is going to be screaming Cam Reddish on ESPN. But
I cannot wait.
I can't. It's going to be funny because I can't wait to get mentioned. Like, why do we trade him or what? Like whatever. But yeah, no, you can find me on Twitter at zhood_, like you said, and then Peachtree Hoops, Clutch Points. I do mostly like betting and stuff like that over there. So if you're into that, check that out. But appreciate you having me on. And, you know, anytime. Good luck. Hopefully Cam works out for the Knicks people. So.
All right. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you coming on. And yeah, maybe we'll bring you back for a check-in show on Cam Reddish at some point. All right, we're going to take our second break, and just wanted to let you guys know this episode is brought to you by betonline.ag. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy betting New Year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year, and the new updated desktop and mobile site is now available to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just got to use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, and so now I will bring us into our third conversation. And I talked to Swish, who's active on Hawks Twitter, active in a lot of Hawks spaces, and who has a podcast of his own coming out again soon. We talked about sort of Reddish's fit with the Knicks and what his role might be and how he might be able to thrive here. And also just kind of what his role was in Atlanta, if he was being misused, things like that. So I thought we had a really good conversation to close the show out here. So without further ado, I'll bring it into my conversation with Swish. All right, I'm joined now by Rish, who you might know as Swish on Twitter at SwishRVG. Super active Hawks fan in Twitter spaces, going over the Hawks all the time there. And Swish, first off, thanks for coming on. And secondly, I want to just hop right into it because we're all very eager for all this Cam Reddish information. So when we were talking a little bit before the show, you had said that you were kind of interested in how Cam's going to fit in New York, and I'm sure that a lot of Knicks fans are really interested in that too. You know, the team is already pretty heavy on wings. You know, so we have RJ Barrett, Evan Fournier, Alec Burks, who, contrary to what Tom Thibodeau thinks, is not a point guard. He is a wing. And Quentin Grimes are all healthy. They're all really productive right now and doing great things for the team. So I'm kind of curious what you think as far as how Cam's going to fit in here, because I think his usage has been, you know, a little, you know, varied in Atlanta. It seems like, you know, I'd be lying if I said I've watched a ton, but I seem to remember that they were sort of having him handle initiation duties off the bench a little bit. It says on his basketball reference that he's played most of his time as small forward, but a decent amount of power forward this year. So, you know, maybe he's being used in small ball like that. I mean, what do you think is going to be the ideal way to use him in New York?
Well, for one, I think the best way to phrase Cam Reddish's fit in New York is that in the current state of the NBA, you just can't have enough three-point shooting wings. I feel like, you know, aside from star players, it's the most valuable position on the court. And it's an added plus when those guys can create a shot for themselves. So the first kind of bullet point I had in mind was that Cam Reddish from the catch and shoot has been shooting north of 40%. Now, sometimes there is inconsistencies in his on-ball creation, which, as you can see, he's not the most efficient player when you look at his stats on like reference or whatnot. Um, but you do see glimpses of rare on-ball creation that you don't see in most young wings. That being said, it's still best used. It's the best way to use him as a catch and shoot player, which I think is really going to work in New York, because one of the ways that I thought Julius was thriving last year was because he had a guy like Reggie that was moving around the perimeter and really being able to catch those outlet passes, which I think would really favor both of Reddish and Randall in a situation in New York. Um, as far as defensively goes, I think, a lot of us overstated how good he was defensively, but there is a lot of potential on that end. He has a rare blend of size and lateral movement. He's 6'8" with, I believe, a near 7 foot or maybe at 7 foot wingspan. And he does show instances where he can use that size to really distract opponents. I mean, early in last season, before he went down with injury, he did a masterful job on Kevin Durant. And we saw kind of how he can be a distractor in an on-ball situation. Now, that being said, we haven't seen too much on-ball premise, but I think that goes to kind of the dysfunction of the Hawks this season and the fact that really no one is seeming to buy into defense on that team. With a guy like Tibbs, if you want minutes on the court, you're going to have to play defense. I think everyone in the league knows that. And I think Reddish knows that. And I think around a bunch of guys that, from my eyes at least, and of course you guys watch more than me, but from my eyes, it seems that everyone seems to buy into Tibbs' plan and method. I think that's a really good environment for Cam to reclaim that defensive potential that he showed. The way I like to describe Cam best defensively is kind of like a free safety in football. He's not a guy that's like a lockdown corner where he's going to strap you up, from one side of the court to the other, but he is a guy that knows how to intercept passing lanes. He loves reading that stuff. He loves coming up with those kind of pick play steals where he can get out in the fast break and really, showcase his athleticism. But as far as on ball goes, there is some inconsistencies there. I don't think he'll ever become like a true lockdown defender by any means, but a guy that can give you a solid defensive effort in the night and show occasional glimpses of really high on-ball defensive potential, and a guy that I think does succeed off-ball is what you should expect while, that catch and shoot three comes around and the highlight finishes. That being said, he's not a perfect finisher at the rim. He does not have a high finishing percentage, but you see the talent there. And again, it's all about potential. And when you make a trade like this, when you're not giving up a lot, you roll the dice on a guy like Cam Reddish for sure.
Yeah, so that kind of leads nicely into I'm actually going to flip flop the questions in the order I was thinking of asking them here, because you mentioned all these different glimpses that you've seen, and that sounds familiar to us as Knicks fans for sure. I mean, there's definitely guys where we've had just glimpses, you know what I mean? Like Miles McBride, he comes in, he plays a little bit, plays great defense, whatever, but it's just a glimpse. Other times he's come in, he's looked like he's a little less comfortable. One thing for sure though is like, you nailed it on the head right there. Like Tibbs definitely requires defense out of, especially his young wings. You know what I mean? Like there's been a little bit of, as Knicks fans, we sort of bemoan the fact that he has sort of different standards for young guys versus vets sometimes. So, Julius Randle or Evan Fournier, for example, might not be held to quite the same defensive standard as like RJ Barrett or Obi Toppin or Quentin Grimes, as far as, if you have a couple misses on defense, are you going to get left off the hook, or is Tibbs going to give you the quick hook? Cam is probably going to fall on the latter there with getting a quick hook if he's not really showing up on defense. And so I wanted to ask, do you think his play is offering more than the stats suggest? Because obviously the three-point shooting stands out. He's shooting really close to like 40% this year. A lot of that's on a diet of catch and shoot, which if the Knicks keep playing how they've been playing lately, which is quite well, he should get a lot of catch and shoot looks, which should bode well for him. But his impact numbers on off, type stats, they're pretty like alarmingly bad. He's one of the only guys consistently getting minutes on the Hawks that shows up as like a -10 in on off, which is just not great. You want to be looking for more than that. Or Basketball Reference has him, I think, is a -15.5 or 14.5 or something like that. So just not great stats all around as far as those are concerned. Do you think those are accurate, or do you think he's just sort of been with bench units or whatever, or just units that weren't suited to his strengths, and then that sort of led to those numbers? Or, what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think, going back to what I said about him not really buying in on defense this season, and like I said, I really fault the whole team. I don't think that's an individual issue. Um, I do think he offers more than especially like the plus minus metrics suggest. The problem with how Cam Reddish was in Atlanta was not only was like he put into a situation where he had to be his own initiator, like you just said, with a lot of bench lineups. DeLon Wright was supposed to be our backup guy that initiated the offense. But now we realize DeLon Wright is not the guy that can really initiate everything. Nothing against him. I think he's been decent. But now you have Cam Reddish going out there with Lou Williams and Danilo, and three of those guys that are just really just out there looking for their own shot and take a lot of time off the shot clock. So that really puts everybody into a kind of uncomfortable situation where, if Gallo's posting up and taking a lot of time off the clock and then kicking it out to Cam where he has to kind of either he does make the catch and shoot, or he's kind of trying to get a mid-range shot and create for himself. That's where the problems begin. It's that kind of stagnancy on offense that I think has led to the plus minus metrics looking that bad. That being said, he has not been like a high impact player this season for us. There's been games and stretches where he has, but it hasn't been like a consistent all around effort. That's why even if you like narrow down the plus minus, you'll see that he doesn't work well with Trey either. He does need to have his own kind of freedom where he can create for himself, but he also needs it to be where it's like in sort of rhythm. The way I look at Cam, I feel like, his star outlook is pretty high. He has a ton of potential, right? But if like he just plays out who he is, I think it's kind of similar to how Kelly Oubre is, in the sense that, and maybe a little bit more so than Kelly Oubre, because Kelly Oubre is not that good of a shooter. But a guy that can occasionally, he's a rhythm type of scorer, a guy that's going to sizzle off the catch and shoot. And if he starts getting into his rhythm, that will expand other assets of his game. Like he'll start locking up on defense. He'll start feeling comfortable driving to the rim. So I do think the plus minus metrics is a little bit misrepresentative just because our bench lineups have been so horrid this season. But at the same time, it's not like he's been so good that this is just like some crazy numerical status that is affecting the way people look at him. Like there's definitely the bad side of Cam Reddish, but the good side of Cam Reddish is also like total opposites.
Cool. So I want to take this just a little more big picture, like meta. What was your reaction when you first saw the trade today? Like what do you think about what the Hawks did? Do you think this shows that there's going to be something bigger coming for the Hawks? Like what was your overall reaction?
So yeah, I mean, I can't tell you and sit here that I was happy with the trade. I was pretty disappointed. I mean, not just because, Hawks Nation does hype up Cam Reddish, but, I'm only 23. So Cam Reddish is a guy, like, if you followed high school hoops, Cam Reddish was a big-time high school player, one of the top-rated players. Of course, he went to go play with RJ and Zion at Duke, and that was, like, the biggest thing. So I've been high on Cam Reddish since I don't even know when, for years now. Came into the league when the Hawks drafted him. I was ecstatic. I was more ecstatic about drafting him than Hunter. Going back, I like Hunter a lot too, but, it hurts because it felt like, I was talking to my friend about this the other day. Like when you have a team full of kids, it feels like your potential is limitless. And then when you make the move to get vets, because I feel like from my perspective as a Hawks fan, I feel like we rushed our rebuild a little bit, even though obviously we made the conference finals last year. It kind of hurts. It feels like we put a limit to our ceiling. It's fun to dream about what Cam Reddish could become. It's fun to dream about what DeAndre can become and stuff like that. So it just kind of shows that our front office wants to get a move on and capitalize on Trey while we have him here. And I do think it's part of something bigger to come. I mean, if you've been following, what's going on with us, there's a lot of turmoil right now. The locker room seems dead. The effort on the court is dead. I mean, this is disgusting. This is worse than when we were rebuilding. Because, like, when we were rebuilding, we had a bunch of guys like, Jabari Parker, Malcolm Delaney. Like, of course, they're NBA players. I respect them. But, they're not going to win you games. And now it feels like we had a roster. We didn't really change much. We brought most of the same pieces back. We added a backup point guard in DeLon Wright. And I thought, we were looking good heading into the season, but it's been tough as a fan to see. So I definitely think it's part of the bigger picture. The one name I keep hearing is Ben Simmons, which kind of feels ironic at this point, given how last season's playoffs turned out. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard day for a Hawks fan that was a big supporter of Cam Reddish.
Yeah, let me tell you, between being super attached to your young core and having that feel limitless, being kind of disappointed by how things have gone this year with greater expectations, all that good stuff. There's a lot more in common between Knicks and Hawks fans than people probably realize this year. Definitely, for how much we all get at each other's throats online and stuff, it's definitely a pretty similar situation this year.
Yeah.
At any rate, Swish, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate all the insights and everything. Did you want to let everybody know one more time where to find you on social media and all that good stuff before we sign off here?
Yeah. Alex, thank you for having me. I love the podcast. My boy Fies, New York or Nothing on Twitter. He put me on to you guys. But yeah, you can find me at Swish RVG on Twitter. I am working on setting my podcast back up. It's called the Swish Sports Show. Me and Fies actually did an episode on RJ Barrett like a year ago when he had his first breakout. Big fan of RJ. Much love to the Knicks. I got no beef with you guys. Good luck to Cam Reddish. I hope you guys ball out the rest of the season, man.
Cool. Thanks so much, man. Thanks for popping on. Really appreciate that. And maybe we'll bring you on if Cam has a big old breakout or something. Maybe we'll bring you back on for a
Sounds good, man.
Little gloat sesh or whatever. All right, and that's it for today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, getting all these different perspectives from all these different people from Hawks fandom. And hopefully you feel more educated about Cam Reddish and able to form better opinions about him based off what we talked about. But I certainly know I do, and I'm very excited to see him suit up in a Knicks uniform and see where this all goes. But till next time, thank you all for listening. Of course, check us out on YouTube if you haven't already, and be sure to subscribe and maybe drop a couple likes. That helps us out a ton. But even if you're just listening, in on the regular, audio podcast, really appreciate you listening to this episode, and hope you really enjoyed it. But till next time, thanks for listening. Talk to you guys all soon. Peace out.